The Pac-12 going out with a bang. What another fantastic matchup between the Oregon Ducks and the Washington Huskies. It's Washington that finishes a perfect Pac-12 season. And if they can continue to play like this, if we get this Washington Huskies in the playoff, they could maybe do some damage.
From LA to Piscataway, all Big Ten all year long. This is Big Ten 10.
Quick question. Can we have Washington and Oregon play every single week? Man, the last 2 years, when these teams get together, you see game of the year candidates. You see games that come down to the absolute wire. Who has the football last? And that's what was the result of this game as well. Washington had the football last, and they were able to run out the clock. What a fantastic matchup. What a way to send these Pac-12 teams out. What a way to send the Pac-12 conference really out as a whole. I think we're really fortunate that we're going to get this Oregon and Washington game as a Thanksgiving weekend, rivalry weekend type of matchup going forward. Of course, those two teams have been playing their in-state rivals, the Civil War and the Apple Cup, kind of for all these years. Washington needed to come out the way they did. They needed to come out with their hair on fire. They needed to come out with confidence. They needed to come out with momentum. You couldn't let Oregon get this lead. You couldn't let Oregon get the fast start. Washington needed to start like they did and the way they did on October 14th when they played. They played from a position of power most of the night, and getting that lead early was so huge. So in my preview, I talked about who's going to Big Ten this game up. Who's going to Big Ten this game up? Who's going to be more physical at the point of attack? If you would have told me the team that does that is going to win, I would say, yes, I agree with you. Oregon's probably going to do that. Oregon's probably going to win that way. But it didn't happen. Washington won the battle in the trenches, both on offense. Their offensive line paving the way for Dylan Johnson. This was a top 10 Oregon rush defense coming into this football game. And they own the line of scrimmage, right? We all know about Washington's pass game. We all know about how explosive they are when things are really on for the Huskies. And they were on today. But then you add in the added element of this run game, of the offensive line doing what they did up front for the Huskies. It makes a full, complete offense. And then you look in the trenches on the defensive side of the ball. Oregon had a good run game coming into this one. Bucky Irving, Jordan James couldn't really get it going on the ground. Of course, Bo Nix had that big run. That was the biggest chunk run for Oregon in this game. But Washington did a great job flowing to the football, attacking the ball carriers. Washington won this game in the trenches. They won it the B1G way, the conference that they're going to be joining upcoming here in 2024. The story is, this is the Washington team that we saw earlier this season. This is the Washington team that needed to show up. Oregon just could not cover Washington's receivers all night. There were points and times where this Huskies offense maybe slowed down a little bit, but overall, Washington, with their balance on offense running the football, and then what happened throughout this pass game as well, was awfully impressive for the Washington Huskies. I think the healthy Jalen McMillan also helped. Maybe he didn't have a super duper game in this one. He had a good game, no question about that, but his talent in this game was just one extra guy. Like, you already got enough guys to cover when you factor in Jalen Polk, when you factor in Roma Dunze, right? When you factor in all of these guys. Jeremy Bernard, like, there's so many good players out there for Washington, and then you throw in an All-American caliber player back from injury like Jalen McMillan. It just makes this thing that much tougher for a team like the Oregon Ducks throughout this game. Now, Oregon, even though Oregon got down early, 3 and outs early in this game. The Ducks were never going to get blown out of this one. Bo Nix wasn't going to let it happen. Right, Dan Lanning and this offensive staff wasn't going to let it happen. They were going to come back. This was always going to be a 4-quarter game. Both of these teams are too good to let this one be that one-sided. And Bo Nix, I really thought when Oregon was coming back and Bo Nix was really getting to a rhythm, I thought they really had Washington on their heels at that point. And it looked like the Ducks were really humming within this football game. But you got to give credit to the Washington Huskies for making the stops when they absolutely needed to. And all of these games that Oregon and Washington get together in, who makes the couple of plays when you get to this time of the year, conference championship time, college football playoff time, when you get to this time of year, who makes just that one play, that second play, that third defensive play? Who makes it? Washington made those plays. Even though Oregon was better on 4th down, they made key 4th down plays in the middle of this game, unlike in the first matchup where they didn't convert on 4th down. This was a Washington team that just made a couple of more plays in this game. But you got to give credit for Oregon fighting back. I thought if Oregon was going to make a stop there late, if Bo Nix got the ball back one more time, even if they had 0 timeouts, even if there was 20 to 30 seconds on the clock and they were at their own 15 or 20 yard line, I thought you get the ball into number 10's hands, Oregon has a shot. But Oregon electing to kick an onside kick in the moment, I say, even though I say kick it deep, even though Washington had been running the ball super effectively, I thought kicking it deep might be the best scenario in that situation, but this is Dan Lanning we're talking about. Dan Lanning is a very aggressive head coach, and I see it from his perspective, or at least what I perceive to be his perspective, is let's go for the onside kick. Our defense has not been able to really stop this Washington run game and Dylan Johnson all night long. We got to get the ball back right now, otherwise they're going to run out the clock. And look what happened. They went out and they ran out the clock. That's exactly how things went down throughout this football game. I thought early, and for most of this game, there were points and times where Oregon got pressure. But I thought a big part for Washington was their pass protection. And I think Kirk Herbstreit said it on the broadcast. A lot of people are going to look to Michael Penix. A lot of people are going to look to Dylan Johnson. They're going to look to all these great skill players at Washington. And rightfully so, but that offensive line may have been the MVP of this football game. They did a pretty solid job protecting Michael Penix throughout this game, and they paved some holes in the run game. This offensive line for the Huskies may be the MVP of this college football game. What a fantastic game. But now we got to look ahead. It's going to be the Washington Huskies that are going to be in the college football playoff. Going up, maybe if Michigan wins, if Georgia wins, you got to think that they play the Wolverines in that Rose Bowl. I'm very curious to see if we see this Washington, if we see a Washington that can be physical at the point of attack, but that can also be explosive over the top, and that a defense that's just good enough where you see that really good offense on the other side, a defense that's just good enough to make a few stops down the stretch. Is this a Washington team that can make a run? Can they win a semifinal? Can they win a national championship? I thought Oregon was maybe the more complete team coming into this game. But Washington proved to me that in big games, that in close games, they can make the plays down the stretch. A fantastic game between Washington and Oregon. Let's get to some of your comments right now. Big Ten TED Champions Club member and our resident moderator saying Michael Penix for Heisman. Big Ten Johnny. John Chenard, I think this last half of the season may have slipped out of his fingers. It wasn't a bad performance, right? No question. When you throw 3 touchdowns, it certainly wasn't a bad performance for Bo Nix. Right now, I would probably say Jaden Daniels at LSU, as much as I maybe hate to admit it. Jaden Daniels is probably the Heisman Trophy winner over at LSU. Even though Oregon had a better season, even though Michael Penix kind of took a dip, maybe this is enough to get Michael Penix an invitation to New York City when all is said and done. But yeah, I don't know if this is enough to vault him back into that conversation to win the Heisman Trophy anyway. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. Tony brings up a good point here. Washington, 4-8 in 2021. Husky fans want to forget the days of Jimmy Lake because ever since Kalen DeBoer has come into this Washington program, the Huskies have turned it around. Like Oregon, you've seen what they. I know Mario Cristobal had things going pretty good, but I don't think you can doubt that Dan Lanning has certainly elevated the Ducks program. But Kalen DeBoer has done a fantastic job at Washington. Him and Ryan Grubb are a great tandem on the offensive side of the football. I said it earlier tonight in another live show talking about transfer portal stuff. I think places like Washington and Oregon are going to be top transfer portal destinations for some of these quarterbacks. The Will Howards, the Cam Wards, guys like that, the Dante Moores, guys like that are in the DJ Uiagalelei, that are in the transfer portal right now. Seattle and Eugene, Oregon are going to be destinations that these guys could eventually end up at down the road. Wow, what a game. I just can't get over how good every single time in recent memory these two times get together. But it's tough for Oregon. Let's talk about the Oregon Ducks now a little bit. Okay, this was a team with Bo Nix coming back and all of these weapons. And I think you got to talk a little bit about the injury to Troy Franklin early. Now, he was able to come back into this game. Was he the same? It didn't seem that they targeted him as much as this game really progressed. So I don't know if that really affected him, right? They kind of threw it in other directions. Same with Bucky Irving. He wasn't 100% down the stretch. Maybe he wasn't, because when they put the ball into the hands of Jordan James, it seems they got a little bit more pop in this run game. So Oregon's going to go to a New Year's Six game. I think this is going to be a audition of sorts for Ty Thompson, the five-star backup quarterback for the Ducks, because everybody's talking about transfers. People are talking about Dante Moore. People are talking about DJ Uiagalelei. They're talking about this guy. They're talking about that guy. Who are the Ducks going to bring in next season? This is an opportunity for Ty Thompson to maybe say, hey, wait a minute. I'm still here. I can still play quarterback for this team and try to do something. All right, let's get to some more comments here. Kraken Hawk is chiming in. UW is going to turn back into a national power with this move to the Big Ten. This is an interesting little transition, a segment of years for the Washington Huskies. And this was a big win because now this is the Washington team that goes to the college football playoff. Okay, this is a Washington program that under Chris Peterson went to the playoff in 2016. 7 years later, right after they dipped down under Jimmy Lake, and then they rise back up under Kalen DeBoer, another spot in the college football playoff. Washington is going to be a very popular destination. They've proven, Oregon's proven it as well, okay, not discounting anything about the Ducks, but Washington, what they did with Michael Penix after he was kind of banged up at Indiana, they took Michael Penix to a completely different level out there in Seattle. There's going to be quarterbacks out there. There's been rumblings about Will Howard, the Kansas State quarterback, that he's getting some looks from Washington. Maybe Cam Ward stays within the state, right? Going from Washington State in Pullman over to UW over there in Seattle. Whoever it is, right? They got a guy over there in Dylan Morris that's sitting there right now as a junior. Is he able to come up and win this job? Washington is a team that I'm glad, like a lot of people in this West Coast expansion, and rightfully so, a lot of people in this West Coast expansion talk about USC and they talk about Oregon. All right? But Washington is another one that you're going to have to factor in there. UCLA is the meme of the dog sitting in there with the fire around him right now saying, this is fine. I tweeted that out the other day. I'm like, this is Chip Kelly right now. And today, right, DeAnton Lynn, their great defensive coordinator, Yeah, he hit the bricks going across town over to USC to be their defensive coordinator. So Washington, USC, and Oregon, I think, are going to be really good in the transition to the Big Ten. And maybe this Rose Bowl coming up on New Year's Day between Michigan and Washington could tell. I mean, I know there's going to be a lot of departing players, trust me. Right? There's probably going to be a departing head coach after the season is over on the Michigan sideline. But I'm very curious to see how they stack up. Because remember, Michigan State wide receiver Jeremy Bernard, he's on this team. He's still going to be there. So Washington hasn't been recruiting the best. Right now, they're about middle of the road in the On3 rankings in the Big Ten. I think I checked today. I think they're right smack dab sitting at number 9 out of 18 right now in the Big Ten. But it's transfer portal, right? High school recruiting is just a segment of building a football team right now. It's a little bit more than that. And if Washington can continue to do well in the transfer portal, maybe eventually their recruiting will catch up. But we know what the recruiting powers are outside the Big Three right now. And then you bring in Oregon, you bring in USC, right? That they've been able to recruit really well over the years. But yeah, it's great to have the Huskies in this conference. I believe having a college football playoff undefeated type of season is a great bridge for them to go into the Big Ten, because I think they know what's going on the recruiting front, right? When it comes to Oregon and USC on the West Coast, when it comes to Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, and some of the other teams in this conference, they know where they sit. So to have this success, it's only going to build the Washington brand as they enter the Big Ten Conference next season. More from Kraken Hawk. He says, DeBoer is greater than Lanning. You know, I talked about, say Jim Harbaugh leaves at the end of the season. Who's the best coach in the Big Ten? I said there was an argument for Dan Lanning. There's certainly an argument as well for Kalen DeBoer to be the best outside of Harbaugh, at least one of the best head coaches in the Big Ten as we approach the 2024 season. Kovac Zero chiming in with a comment here. We'll see what happens when Washington plays good defenses. Okay, Oregon was a top 10 defense against the run. Against the pass, they were a little bit farther down the pecking order. And you kind of saw that. I think Washington attacked, maybe not saying it's ultra weak, but at least the weak point of the Oregon defense. If things play out the way they should, they'll have Michigan and then Georgia. No way they win a championship here, according to Kovac Zero. Those are two extremely difficult matchups for the Washington Huskies. Even though they won the trenches here against Oregon, I think winning the trenches against the Oregon Ducks, a lot different than winning the trenches against the Michigan Wolverines. Even without Zach Zinter and that offensive line. That's going to be a very difficult matchup. And that Michigan secondary is very opportunistic. Mikey Sainristil still jumps routes. Will Johnson is known for jumping a route and taking the ball the other way. All right, so that's a tantalizing matchup. Seeing their pass rush, their deep defensive line against this Washington O-line, and then you look at the receiver and defensive back matchups out there that are tantalizing as well. Wow. I want to see that as a traditional Big Ten fan. I want to see Big Ten Pac-12 to kind of send out this era and put a bow on this era of college football. Not sure if that'll happen. If Georgia takes care of business, it'll happen. Right? Georgia's got to beat Alabama. I feel pretty strong, even though the Bulldogs and the Crimson Tide didn't put out very captivating performances, right, to put it mildly, against the Yellow Jackets and Auburn Tigers, respectively, last week. I still believe Georgia's the better team than Alabama. And I would favor Georgia. Because I don't want this from SEC fans. I don't want this, Georgia got knocked out, and then Alabama wasn't our better representative. You know what? I want us to end the streak. I want to do it in a big way. Michigan, Georgia, right? Georgia ran them off the field in 2021. That's a rematch that I think everybody would love to see. That would draw a huge rating for ESPN. That would draw a huge rating. We're not going to get the Big Ten versus future Big Ten national championship that I thought maybe we would see. But yeah. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. Tony chiming in again. Washington offensive line played great. And I'll admit it. I was wrong. Oregon, great offensive line. I thought if someone was going to win the trenches, it was going to be the Oregon Ducks. And it wasn't. It was Washington. And you got to give all the credit to the Huskies, right? Even though they didn't play their best in the second half of the season. 8-point win against an ASU team. 42-33 against Stanford. You can go down the list throughout all these games. But the Pac-12, an extremely deep conference. Maybe things just got competitive. At the end of the season, they got up for this last Pac-12 title game, and you saw the result. Silas Sule, hope I got that right, chiming in. Washington, Michigan, great matchup at the Rose Bowl, right? The folks in the Rose Bowl are going to be talking to the college football playoff committee. It's like, yeah, don't put Michigan 1. And I'm kind of in the same boat. Let's just let it all play out. I'm sure Michigan would love to, hey, maybe we should be number 1 and get a matchup against someone like a Florida State or a Texas over there. But no, let's get a traditional Rose Bowl to send this era of college football out the right way. Tony chiming in. I saw that game. That was after last weekend was a crazy, Northwestern and Illinois going back and forth, the final Big Ten West game of all time. A lot of finals here these last 2 weekends. And I saw that Bama hail. I'm like, 4th and 30-something? Oh, Auburn just got to play safe, knock it down, do what you need to do. But Alabama, man, I tell you, and I think the broadcasters, Brad Nessler and Gary Danielson, talked about this, is when Alabama and Auburn play a Jordan-Hare, crazy things happen. You get some crazy games out there as well. Yes, Big Ten Johnny chiming in. If you want to support the channel, support our live shows here at the channel, make sure you hit the $ and leave a donation sometimes. Sometimes on some of these shows, we can get a lot of comments, so that's a way to make sure yours stands out, and it's guaranteed to get on the screen. Account 22 chiming in. Got some Michigan Wolverines there in the Avatar. Oregon defense, Swiss cheese. This was a defense that did not play their best game, certainly. And I thought Oregon could maybe do some things defending the run, but it just didn't work out that way. There were some things in my preview. Now, I said in my preview, for Washington to come out of this thing with the victorious, they need to do kind of what they did last time. They need to get things going early in the pass game. They need to get ahead. They need to build a lead, and they need to be very efficient in their pass game and play a lot better than they had playing. That's exactly what happened. And then more, right, to see Washington able to do some things in the run game also helped as well. Dan Lanning, that's right, has yet to win a football game over Kalen DeBoer. Has a big advantage right now for Kalen DeBoer. James Blackwell, let's chime in here with a comment. Oregon really wasn't in this game because Washington left scores on the table. This game should not have been close. Oregon has been overrated all year, in my opinion. So, kicking field goals there in the first half, Oregon came up with some stops late in the first half. If they don't come out with some stops, who knows where this game ends up early. The big part in this game that allowed Oregon to really get back was them carrying the momentum at the end of the first half, making this a 10-point game. They get the ball coming out again, and Oregon goes down the field. Boom. 20-17. Field goal for Washington. Touchdown. And now all of a sudden you got a 3-point game. Whew. Okay, now we're leveled up. Now let's see what happens. That's what Oregon needed. They needed to get back to that opportunity. They needed to get back to that level where we're not playing catch-up. Let's play with some mustard. Account 22 chiming in here. I didn't know exactly where they were ranked, but 65th in the country here, according to our resident Wolverine fan in the pass defense. You got Kyrie Jackson over there, the Alabama transfer. That's pretty solid, but I think you got to give a lot of credit to Washington. Right? Their wide receiving group, I said at the beginning of the year, when Washington, this was probably actually before Washington joined the Big Ten, Ohio State's got the best receiving room in the country. Marvin Harrison Jr., Emeka Buka, all these guys. I watch Washington more, and I think Washington's wide receiver room is deeper. I think it's better from top to bottom, from 1 to 8 or 1 to 9, however many guys are in a specific wide receiver room. It's just Jalen Polk, Jalen McMillan, Rome Odunze, Giles Jackson. Like, there's so many guys. Jeremy Bernard is buried on this depth chart. Jeremy Bernard, the former Michigan State wide receiver, is probably going to go into Washington next year as one of the top guys. And it would not surprise me to see him light it up, to see him have something like 1,200 yards and 10 touchdowns. That would not surprise me in the slightest to see that happen, assuming they get a quarterback in there that can sling it almost as good as Michael Penix can. But Jeremy Bernard, I think they're going to go after some more receivers in the transfer portal as well. And boy, you talk about this being a quarterback destination. Washington right now, wide receiver destination. I think they've proven that, hey, receiver, you go to Washington, good things are going to happen for you in your future. Cracking on kind of maybe a different perspective. Let's put it that way. Oregon has a good defense. Washington's made their defense. That's what I said before. You got to give credit to Washington. Michael Penix is one of the very best quarterbacks in the country. Washington has I don't want to really feed into the Husky ego too much, but Washington has maybe a generational wide receiver group, right? It's not 2019 LSU. I don't think it's quite there, but it's really, really good. It's really difficult to defend. Michigan could be the matchup coming forth, and they got to figure things out. The big key for Washington, you got to find a way to get home. Oregon just didn't get home enough. Early in this game, it was proven, okay, we can't sit back in the coverage. We can't cover these guys. We need to get home. I thought at times Oregon maybe should have brought a more blitz packages, more pressure. It just didn't happen. It didn't happen that way. Tony chiming in once again. Georgia will blow out Alabama. I think Georgia's going to win that game. A lot of people out there this week, they're throwing around, what if this happens and this happens and this happens and this happens? And okay, we're college football fans. We love chaos. We love anarchy. But I think this thing's going to go down a little bit more smoothly than people anticipate. Georgia, I think, wins this game. And I could be wrong, because I was wrong about this one. I picked Oregon to win. Not only did I pick Oregon to win, I picked Oregon to win the way that Washington won, how I thought Oregon was going to win, if that makes sense. That was kind of got twisted in my brain as I kind of went down over there as well. Kovac Zero chiming in that the Pac-12 defense is Swiss cheese. Those offenses are pretty good, right? This is going to be a Big Ten talking point this offseason on this channel. On this very channel. West Coast offenses, Big Ten defenses. Some people have said, well, the Big Ten defenses are so great because they don't play great offense. Well, the offenses out west are so great because they don't play a lot of defense. We're going to find out. We're going to find out. That's what I love about this. Big Ten TED Champions Club member John Chenard chiming in. It'll be an interesting dynamic because at least for next year, you'll have two conference champions recruiting in the same conference. I understand what he's saying. Now, the Pac-12 won't exist, so it's essentially irrelevant at that point, winning that conference title. But I think it's more about Washington being undefeated, getting to the playoff. Kalen DeBoer can go into some of these kids' living rooms, maybe these transfers, maybe these recruits, and say, we made it to the college football playoff. Look at our success as of late. We beat Oregon 3 times in a row. They beat USC this year. I'm not sure what the most recent matchup other than this year was for the Huskies against the Trojans. But, yeah, it's going to be recruiting in this league. Like, I'm going to really start to spend some time once we get to the offseason. I'm going to enjoy the end of this season. But once we really get to the offseason, that's when I'm really curious to see what is exactly going to happen with these teams. Do I think Washington is going to achieve 9 wins, 10 wins? UCLA looks like a team That does not look very good. Okay, I'm just going to say that. They do not look very good right now. Maybe things will change in the transfer portal. Maybe things will change. Paul Holman chiming in. Thanks, Paul, for being here. Should Washington be number one in the country if Georgia loses based off strengths of schedule, being best in wins in the country? So, no. Well, Washington would have 2 wins against Oregon. Okay? Michigan would have wins against Ohio State and Penn State. So that's, I believe, what you're comparing right now. Is Washington good enough to leapfrog the Michigan Wolverines? Are they a better conference champion? Does the committee view the Pac-12 as stronger than the Big Ten? Do they view that a bigger gauntlet? How do they stack up Ohio State and Penn State versus Oregon twice? One of them being on a neutral site. That is, look, based on what I know about the history of this committee for the last 10 years, I don't think they're doing that. Like I said before, I think that Rose Bowl, because remember, the Rose Bowl was the last bowl committee to really sign this new deal for a 12-team playoff and kind of break away from tradition. They said, you know what? Do us a solid. Give us Big Ten, Pac-12 one more time. Give it to us one more time out there. So, yeah, I don't think that's happening. Kraken Hawk, more from him. UW is crushing the portal. After tonight's game, there will be many high school flips to Washington. I'm very curious to see how the recruiting front. Remember, early signing day is coming up about the 3rd week or so of December. I think maybe 4 or 5 days before Christmas, something like that. These are the types of games. These are the types of wins that can maybe vault Washington into the next level. Now, is Washington going to go from 9th in the Big Ten in recruiting to being a top 10 national class and a top 3 or 4 Big Ten class? No, I don't think so. Recruiting-wise, those things take time. And West Coast schools recruiting to the Big Ten, like they're going to have to figure out, what do we have to do to win in the Big Ten? We know we have structured our team to win in the Pac. How do we win in the Big Ten? They're going to have to recruit. But yeah, maybe Washington can put things back together as well. I get that the Count 22 bringing it up, what I brought up in the preview. Washington has struggled with a lot of bad teams. Depth of the Pac-12. When you watch October 14th, which I did, and then you watch this game, you kind of think to yourself, what happened in between? What happened? Maybe Washington is just a team that plays a lot of close games. And maybe Washington is just a team that finds a way to win these close games. Some teams are like that. Maybe Washington is one of these teams. One of these teams. Let's get to a comment here. Tony, Ted, what do you think about the onside kick with 2 minutes and 3 timeouts? I think I covered that before, but I will say it again. I would have kicked it deep. But I understand him onside kicking it. Was it damned if you do, damned if you don't? You kick it like Washington, we've talked about this many times so far on this reaction show. Washington went and ran it on this top 10 Oregon rush defense all night long. What Dan Lanning's trying to do there, what Dan Lanning is trying to do in that particular situation, he's trying to say, I don't know if I trust my rush defense. I don't know. I got to get this ball now. And that's eventually what happened. Because we can't stop these guys. We just can't stop these guys. Not good for the Oregon defensive line here tonight. Thanks for the $2 to Paul Holman. For those of you interested in supporting the channel here, hit that $sign to attach a donation to your comment. Should Washington be ranked number 1 if Georgia loses to Alabama? That's been brought up before. No, I don't think so. I don't think so. I understand going through the Pac-12, but if I know anything about this committee, I know they're going to have the SEC champion over the Pac-12 champion. What should it be? That might be a little bit of a different story. That might be a little bit of a different story. as well. So we'll see. We'll see as well. Let's move on here. Kraken Hog diving in, say, discovered you after the Washington, Oregon announced the move to the Big Ten. Appreciate the comments here. Thanks for the honest commentary. Bow down, and I am, okay? I bow down to you. I picked Oregon. Like, I was looking at these last 6 games, and I thought this was going to continue. It didn't. So I bow down to you, Washington. I was wrong on that front. And I don't think I was the only one. I think there were a lot of people that were kind of seeing it the way I saw it. So, not saying that's an excuse, but I'm just saying I'm not the only one. I give all the credit in the world to the Washington Huskies. All the credit in the world to the Washington Huskies. I'll take the L. I'll take the L on that one. Certainly. Washington looked great. And Oregon falls short. All right, let's get to some more comments here a little bit. And before, I'm going to pull up the box score of this game because I want to take a look at kind of the in-depth statistics in this game as well. But I just want to make sure I get to some of these comments. Got a good amount of comments here tonight. So if you want your comment to stand out, attach a donation to it so I make sure I get to it right now. All right, let's kind of go. Yeah, account 22 is seeing what I saw. Dogfight Stanford, Arizona State, Wazoo. That's what I was looking at coming into this game. I see Oregon dominating a lot of similar opponents that Washington went down to the wire with. But this game, I think if you now looking at both games, I think this game was more properly evaluated. You would have done a better job evaluating this game by looking at the October 14th matchup rather than the last 6 matchups. Because they were very similar contests. And Robert kind of coming up with this as well. None of them have the O-line on the level of the Washington Huskies. Some people saying that Washington won't do great in the Big Ten Conference. It remains to be seen. Exactly what's going to happen, but I can't wait to really find out what does happen with all of these teams as well. Matthew Whittington, it has come to an end. This is the end of an era for the Pac-12. Washington, you are a Big Ten representative now. You are a Big Ten representative. I can't wait to see maybe a Big Ten versus Big Ten. I know it's not July yet, right, when that move officially gets made, matchup in the Rose Bowl, but that's going to be kind of fun. And this is, first of all, whoever won this game was going to get into the playoff. Right? This was a playoff quarterfinal. But this is really good, I think, for the Big Ten. Oregon, they recruit really well. They're a brand. We all know that. I think having Washington be of strength going into this conference creates a lot more depth in this league as well. Q Valpo, Oregon just didn't show up. They weren't prepared. You can't go 3-and-out in your first 3 possessions and expect to win. The Ducks can just never win on the big stage. Well, they beat Wisconsin in a couple of Rose Bowls. I remember that pretty well. But that's what really set him back. Oregon needed to get off to a fast start, and they didn't. It was Washington that got out running. A lot like the first game was more back and forth, 7 points, 7-15 to whatever, with the 2-point conversions that Dan Lanning did in that game. This was one where Washington, and I said it right off the top of this show, they threw a haymaker early. Right? Sometimes if you watch MMA, if you watch boxing, something like that, when a fighter knows, hey, if this one goes a couple of rounds, if this one goes a couple of rounds, if this one kind of goes a little bit further than it's supposed to, I don't know if I'm going to be able to survive the longer this fight goes. So Washington, not saying that's what Washington believed, but Washington throws that haymaker right away. And it kind of puts Oregon on their heels a little bit. Props to the Ducks for coming back, but Oregon got the last couple of shots in. Let's get to some more comments. I am going to get to that box score eventually, trust me. But I want to make sure I get to some of these comments here because it is a very active night here in the chat. Kraken Hawk, DeBoer is 24-2 at Washington. Crazy. Lanning and DeBoer came in at the same time. 3-0 versus the Ducks. 1-0 versus USC. 2-0 versus Michigan State. Remember they had that home and home and beat Texas in a bowl game last year, and 13-0 this year. What a start it has been for Kalen DeBoer at the University of Washington. It has been a fantastic start. My hope, I don't know if this will happen. My hope is that, because I've said about the future of this conference, Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, right? We know that those are the heavy hitters in this version of the Big Ten. But now with a version of the Big Ten that's off screen, right, somewhere else, Oregon and USC, those teams are going to come in. Do they make how does that divide into tiers? But those are 5 recruiting powers at the top of the league. You add Washington to that mix, like the Big Ten, I'll say this. Oregon, Washington, you add those West Coast teams this year, and I know it's different because you're playing different teams and all that. You're playing Stanford, you're playing Arizona State, you're playing teams like that. But if you look at these teams this year, it might be the best conference in college football. It might be. You look at the SEC, you look at Georgia, you look at Alabama. LSU's got a great quarterback, but their defense hasn't been that great. So, you got to factor that in as well. I just think at the top, maybe there'd be a little bit more depth in the Big Ten. But we could go back and forth. We could go back and forth on that until we're blue in the face. And I'm sure there'd be SEC fans arguing their point. And I could understand some points. So I'm sure we could go back and forth on a long time on all of this as well. All right, let's get to a few more comments here. Here's from Miami. Pac teams will only benefit from joining the Big Ten. Both Oregon and Washington are way ahead in program development, and they've been in the weaker conference. The Pac was pretty deep this year. Okay, there'd be a lot of people out there that would probably say the Pac was a better conference than the Big Ten. I wouldn't push back on them too much. Look at Arizona and what Jed Fish was able to do. By the way, if we get through all of this coaching carousel and Jed Fish is at Arizona, that is a big win for the Wildcats. That if he doesn't jump to a Big Ten program or an SEC program. Huge win over there. We got a Husky fan in the house. I'm sure we got a lot of Husky fans in the house. Here from Kenneth, Husky fan here. People like Coach DeBoer. They will get recruits, and they will do well in the transfer portal. I trust that Washington is going to be a player in this conference when we start things in 2024. They're going to get into the college football playoff, an undefeated season in maybe the deepest league in the country. This is a huge plus for Washington. Because like I said, Oregon and USC, they've proven it for many years. These are programs that can recruit, and they're going to be in there. Washington has had their ups and downs, but right now, they're going up. They're going up mountains. They're going up the Cascades, baby. They're going up Mount Rainier. They're going up all those great mountains at Olympic National Park, where I might be this summer. It's beautiful in Washington, right on the football field, and out for a nice afternoon hike as well. Thanks, everybody, for joining the show here tonight. I'm going to look for some super chats. There's a lot of chats right now, so I'm going to look to the super chats here first. Let's go first to Dan. Thank you for the $10. UW is better than Oregon. Oregon, Twitter, and clickbait team, Vegas, they all fell for it. I will admit I fell for it, Dan. I think maybe you did too, as he said, as I said. But excited to listen to your show more next season. I fell for it. A lot of people fell for it. National guys fell for it, as we're referring to Dan's comment here. But Washington, I really believed in Oregon down the stretch. and I really thought that they were a better football team. But on this day, the better football team, no question, was the Washington Huskies. They made the plays that they absolutely needed to throughout this thing as well. Dylan chiming in, Washington's going to win it. Oh, how about that? Assuming you're talking about the college football playoff. Also, Dylan, gotta shout you out for the Tacoma Rainers, I forgot how it's pronounced, AAA baseball logo there in your avatar. I'm a big, sometimes in my free time, I play the Out of the Park baseball simulation game. And I know that's the AAA affiliate there of the Seattle Mariners. So you love to see that. I can come to appreciate that as well over there at Tacoma, a suburb of Seattle as well. A lot of people talking about the future, which I appreciate, but talking about the right here and talking about the right now. I want to see how the Washington Huskies, how do they go to that next level? How do they, if they match up against Michigan, because that's where I'm looking at. Look at the logos behind me. Look at the name of the channel. Look at it all. Look at it all. Can they match up with Michigan? That is a fantastic matchup. If we see something like a Georgia and a Florida State in another round, that I think is going to be a Georgia blowout, especially if we don't see well, Florida State might lose. They got a third-string quarterback possibly playing against Louisville, and Jeff Brom might be able to exploit that. He might be able to bring it home. He might be able to bring it home. He might be able to get it done. All right, I'm going to take a look. I'm going to take a look at the box score through this game. We're going to take a look at some stats from this matchup, see how this game kind of broke down a little bit. All right, here we go. Let's take a peek. All right, so Bo Nix, you look at his day, 21 of 34, 239, and 3 touchdowns throughout this game. Bo Nix did not have a bad day, certainly, right? There obviously did not have a bad day. But I think it was the way he started. It was the way he started and Oregon getting down early, and then how Washington came out in this game that really affected the way this thing really ended up in the end. That's why we are where we were. Kind of going back to that Michigan point, here's sports fan from nowhere chiming in. Michigan wins by 2 scores throughout that matchup. J.J. McCarthy, remember last year in that semifinal against TCU. A little bit of confusion with that 3-3-5 scheme over there. Can Washington do more of the same? I think that where that Washington and Michigan game could potentially be decided, can Washington move the ball against these Michigan defensive backs that have been opportunistic taking the football away? Can the offensive line at Washington play good enough against some really good pass rushers? Jalen Harrow, Braden McGregor, and some of these other guys in that deep defensive line where Michigan continues to rotate in and out. That is going to be a fantastic matchup. If that's indeed the matchup that we do get throughout this one. But you got to take a look over here as well at Michael Penix Jr., if we can. There's kind of your quarterback stat lines. 27 of 39, 319. Only 1 touchdown for Michael Penix Jr. in this game because if I continue to scroll down here, you see why. Dylan Johnson. That was the key in this game. The offensive line and the run game. We've seen a lot of different games this year for the Washington Huskies where, sure, they throw it. They're throwing it. But maybe, even though Dylan Johnson ran for 100 yards in that Oregon game earlier this season, but maybe they don't have the balance, right? They've got one of the best passing attacks, if not the best passing attack in the country. What about this run game? This is the balanced offense. This is the Washington we need to see if they want to make a run in the college football playoff. This is the team we need to see. A great offensive line and all of that stuff as well. All right, let's talk more about this. And I think you got to take a look on the left side here. Let me see if I can zoom in to get a better shot of it right there. The run game. Oregon just didn't have that run game. This was a really good Oregon run game, a really good offensive line. You got to give all the credit in the world to the Washington Huskies in the way they defended it. Bo Nix, you look for 6 for 69. There we go, 44-yard run. I assume the long run there was that big one that set up a touchdown. But you look at Jordan James, you look at Bucky Irving, they were really held in check. And was Bucky Irving 100%? Maybe not. But that was the big part. Now, you put the ball, but that's Oregon adapted. They said, well, run game's not working. We got to put the ball into the hands of Bo Nix, and we got to let him make plays. That's exactly what happened. He did make plays down the stretch, just not enough. Account 22, maybe hit me up on Twitter, because it's about every summer we go see national parks. We went up to Canada. We've gone to Yellowstone. We've gone to Utah, gone to Colorado. This one's next. Right now, the two candidates are Olympic National Park, Mount Rainier, a Washington trip. That's not just because the Huskies won. That has actually been in the plans and been in the works. And then maybe out to the East Coast or Maine. So I'd love to hear more about the state of Washington. Going to maybe the Big Ten country for a trip this summer out to the state of Washington. Going to bow down over there. Receiving. Jalen McMillan, 9 catches, 131 yards. I think earlier I said he maybe didn't have a super duper good game. Man, maybe I missed something there, but he had the best game there. Jalen McMillan certainly did. It was so key having him back. There were so many other players involved, right? It kind of get lost on you how good of a game maybe Jalen McMillan really had in this football game. Roma Dunze 8 for 102. What a job! What a job! And Oregon just couldn't defend him all night long. Let's look at Oregon throwing the football, the receiving game as well. Troy Franklin, 4 for 34. That's one thing that really stands out to me. And the injury that he suffered in that game might have been a pretty big factor. A pretty big factor throughout this entire game. He eventually came back into the ball game, but what was his health? We just don't know that. We may never know that when all is said and done. Thanks, everybody. That's not right. Thanks, everybody, for tuning into the show here tonight. And a big win for the Washington Huskies, getting the big-time win over the Oregon Ducks. Want to check in here, some more comments. Thank you, Kovac0 for the $10. Bo Nix started like he was wearing Auburn colors. Ooh, that hurts for the Duck fans. Washington loses to Michigan or Georgia. They just aren't good enough. Give them a fighting chance. It looks like it's Michigan. That's if everything kind of pans out. Oh boy, I see we got a national park debate going on in the comments, which I might get to. But I thought Bo Nix there was a lot of pressure on his, because the run game wasn't really going. There was a lot of pressure on Bo Nix to really create plays. And I said this before, if he got the ball again, if Oregon's defense comes up with the stop, Bo Nix could go down there and get on the board. He could make a play. He could lead him down into the end zone. He could win him a football game. But thanks again for the $10. Once again, you want your comment highlighted on a busy night like tonight, hit the $sign so I can see your comment stands out in the chats that I'm reading as well over here. Let's get to some more comments. As well. I see some Georgia fans in here, and I respect you. Georgia is as good as it gets in college football as well. Marty Williams, bow down to the dogs as well. H. Post chiming in on a score prediction for tomorrow, 28-9. We will have a live reaction show to the Michigan-Iowa game, Big Ten Championship, just like this one as well. Dylan chiming in, Washington getting the big win as well here tonight. Some people talking about the SEC championship game over there as well. H Post, Crater Lake. Crater Lake is way better according to Rick Olson. We got this Oregon-Washington park debate going on that I'm all about as well. Jip, salute to Washington throughout this as well. Here's a good point from LFG. Can they retain Ryan Grubb? I think that's the big one right now. I believe now that Washington is in the Big Ten Conference, I think that gives them a big advantage to retaining a guy like Kalen DeBoer. All right? Because a Big Ten job is a Big Ten job. You're going to see with all this TV money coming up, you're going to be having these Big Ten and SEC jobs separate from maybe the Big 12 and the ACC jobs from, of course, kind of going down a further level than that as well. So Kalen DeBoer would not anticipate him leaving Seattle, Washington, certainly anytime soon. Anytime soon. All right, let's get to some more comments as well. Got a lot tonight. Hear from Rich Delgado. I'm willing to talk about anything. And here's Alabama beats Georgia. Does Georgia still make the playoffs? Right now, this is such a parity-driven year. Right now, I'm saying if whoever wins, I think there's one SEC team this year. So what do we know? What do we know right here and now with what just happened? We watched it in that room just right over there. Washington's in. Lock. They're in 13-0. There were some arguments, hey, if we get some chaos and Oregon's the Pac-12 champion, what happens from there? I get that. All right. But I think the SEC champion is in. I think the Pac-12, obviously, champion is in right now. Michigan, boy, that would be the upset of the century. Coming from, you see all these logos, all this behind here, coming from me. I recognize how good Iowa's defense is, but that's the upset of the century right there. So you got an SEC champ, you got a Big Ten champ, you got a Pac champ. So right now, the realistic scenario for me is that the SEC champion is in, and then what happens to the ACC and the Big 12? Those conference champions. Right now, I believe it's those conference champions that find a way to get in. That's the way I feel about the SEC debate right now in the college football playoff. If you are new to the channel, you're a Washington fan, you're celebrating a win, and you're going to be watching this channel a little bit more, consider hitting that join button to be a member of the Big Ten TED Champions Club, like our guy Big Ten Johnny. Special perks for members here, so consider doing that. Let's see. Anthony Ballard. The answer is, actually, I think there's more than one. I feel like TCU, this popped up. I know this because it pains me to admit it as a Wisconsin fan, that TCU game when Andy Dalton in 2010, I think, when TCU found a way to win that game over there. John stating the obvious. John, the ultimate hype man and moderator, doing a great job here. Going to have some amazing previews. Boy, what's going to be coming up after this Saturday? Got to figure out what's going to be happening after this Saturday. That's a great question. With all this transfer portal stuff, there's been a lot of news within college football. But yeah, definitely going to have some bowl matchups and some playoff matchups as well. Going to have some pregame analysis. I'm going to be going out of town New Year's, but I'm going to be back for the Rose Bowl. I'm going to be back for the Rose Bowl. So I won't have reaction shows if we have maybe some of these new, like Oregon gets into a New Year's 6 game, Penn State, Ohio State, things like that. But I'm going to be back for the Rose Bowl. I'm going to have all kinds of content for that matchup, previews and kind of breakdowns of that one as well. Might be talking to our guy Roman Tomashoff over at Locked On Huskies as well. Kind of have talked to him and interviewed him in the last year when it was announced that Washington joined the Big Ten. Might be talking to him about some of this. And really, we're going to see a lot of breakdowns, right, with both the Wolverines and the Huskies as we kind of get closer to this thing. We're going to probably have a lot of time. We're going to have close to a little less than a month to really break this thing down. If it ends up being the Wolverines and the Huskies, which is where I think it is going to go when all is said and done. H-Post chiming in. Texas gets in over Alabama if both win. Yeah, that's where we could see right? If Alabama wins, I know I said that the SEC champion gets in, and I still believe that. But there was a scenario, I've been listening to all kinds of podcasts this week. What happens in a scenario where, well, Washington, we already know they're in. Michigan wins, they're in. A couple of 13-0 clubs right there. Let's say Alabama wins. Florida State wins and Texas wins. Florida State is undefeated. Now you're choosing between 12-1 Alabama and 12-1 Texas. Head to head. Texas. No SEC. I'm a realist. Even though you see the logos on the wall and you know what this channel is based around, if you're new, now you know. I just don't think the committee is going to leave out the SEC champ. I don't think they're going to do it. It's just not going to happen. I want to say this. I want to say this about this rivalry. I'm so glad that Oregon and Washington, from what I've heard, because kind of from an outsider's perspective, Big Ten kind of looking on this thing. Of course, we had that relationship with the Pac-12 for all those years in the Rose Bowl. But I always thought Oregon State and Oregon were the arch rivals, Washington and Washington State. But then I've come to learn more about this so-called Cascade clash between the Ducks and the Huskies. And this is really the rivalry. And I think now with Oregon State and Washington State kind of dropping down to the G5 kind of Mountain West scheduling arrangement that they're going to have, you're going to see this Oregon and Washington rivalry, especially being played now when they join the Big Ten in 2024 at the end of the season. And the way these games have gone as of late, can you say Big Ten Saturday night? It's going to be fun to watch. It's going to be really fun to see this kind of go down as well. All right, let's get to some more comments if we can here. LFG, Oregon and Washington, they do not like each other. They hate each other. M. Dutchy. SEC fans would riot in the streets, I assume you're talking about, if they don't get in to the college football playoff. There's a scenario, folks. There is. Like, SEC fans might not like it. But there is a scenario. I don't think and I said this before, I don't think the committee's going to do it. They're going to put in an SEC champ. They're going to put in Bama if Bama beats Georgia. It's the cold, hard truth. You might not like it. If you're a Washington fan, you might not like it. If you're a Big Ten fan, you might not like it. If you're an Oregon fan, whatever fan you are, you might not like it. But it's the truth. It's the truth. Sean Kramer chiming in with a prediction. Can we bookmark this one? Can we come back to this one? Oregon, Washington to determine the Big Ten title game next year. So I'm assuming by that statement you think either the Ducks or the Huskies will get in and one of them will not. Maybe there's a rematch. Back-to-back games. I know that's one thing that some folks have said, we don't want that. That's one thing we don't like about this non-divisional format. You could see Ohio State and Michigan in back-to-back years. You could see, or in back-to-back weeks, you could see, and it kind of devalues this rivalry. I think it might hype it up a little bit more on a bigger stage. Some of these Big Ten championship games, you can say what you want about the Big Ten West, but some of these Big Ten championship games lately have, maybe not been as competitive, right? Of course, with this East-West split. Yeah, we talked about, Chance Ford Billups kind of brings up here. We talked about Iowa being the forever Big Ten West champions. Washington is the forever Pac-12 champions. Now that this conference is going away, I hope, and I know this has been talked about, because right now Oregon State and Washington State, I don't really keep up with these court cases. I'm not a lawyer. I hate this stuff. I hate what's going on right now on all fronts. It sounds like Washington State and Oregon State are kind of taking control of the assets of the Pac. I hope they don't keep the name of the Pac. I hope it's a reverse merger and they get the assets, but they keep the name of the Mountain West. I always thought that was a really good name for that conference. They've had good branding, good logos, that type of stuff. I hope it's the Mountain West. It's just they get their own network and they maybe take a step up with some of these Pac assets throughout all this stuff as well. But we'll see if that eventually does take place. Jason Ernst chiming in. Can Washington get the number 1 seed? I've kind of touched on that before. It would take a Georgia loss. But then can they leapfrog Michigan? I think that's where we need to take a look at the schedules. And you brought it up, so let's take a look at it. Let's take a look at both of these team schedules. I don't know if I can do it I don't know of a website that really does it side by side. But being a Big Ten channel, I kind of know Michigan's schedule and what's kind of happened off the top of my head. But let's kind of go and take a look at the Washington Huskies and maybe take a look at, we talked about these second half games at the end of the season. Would that come back to hurt Washington in a 1 versus 2 possible debate? But let's look at the schedule and what has happened for the Washington Huskies. Just give me a minute here. There it is. Washington's schedule so far this season. They dominated early against Boise State, against Tulsa, against Michigan State. Scored a lot of points against Cal, a 7-point win over Arizona, which is now looking to like a pretty good win over a good Arizona team. So you beat Arizona, you beat Oregon twice. USC, they went 7-5, not ranked. Utah, Oregon State, okay type of wins. This is very interesting because Arizona really sticks out to me as a very interesting win right now for the Washington Huskies. But I think it would come down to the committee saying, how much do we value are the back-to-back win, not back-to-back, but you get what I'm saying. 2 wins over Oregon. How does that compare to an Ohio State and a Penn State win? I think that would be the first determining factor if you want to leapfrog Washington to the number 1 spot. Now, considering that these games are all neutral site games, I think the big factor is matchups. A lot of people been listening to a lot of podcasts this week, and all of them say, we want Florida State. We want Florida State. We want that backup quarterback. We want that third-string quarterback. So you might be asking yourself, well, what does it matter if it's neutral site anyways? It's the matchup. It's always the matchup. Okay, because if you get Georgia, FSU, Michigan, Washington in the playoff, yeah, you would love to play Florida State. As much as I would love, and I'm going to love this Big Ten versus Pac-12 matchup, it's the possible taking on FSU an easier path to get to that as well. So Sean Kramer chiming in as well. Oregon greater than Iowa by a lot, referring to these last championship games. What if Michigan in this championship? What if Michigan in this championship? Iowa's got a really good defense. What if Iowa's defense just plays a really strong game? Really strong game, and Michigan wins kind of that physical type of brand of football that we know from the Michigan Wolverines. What if they go and win a football game, I don't know, 28-6? Where does that leave the committee? But this is all about the matchup. Kovac Zero, thank you for the $10. Once again, if with a lot of comments coming in, hit the $ donation, get your comment feature and shout it out as well. ESPN Disney dumped too much money into the SEC to not have a team into the championship, right? ESPN has the exclusive rights to the college football playoff right now. ACC was the rival, but it's not the Big Ten. Look, the SEC champs getting in. You might not like it, I might not like it, but they're getting in. They're getting in. They might throw a head-to-head, even though the committee said head-to-head was very important. The committee right now is rooting for something very easy. They're rooting for Georgia to win. If Georgia wins, this thing gets a lot easier. Because now for the committee, if Georgia wins and if Michigan wins, now you're going up against an undefeated Florida State and a one-loss Texas. If both of those teams win, you take the undefeated team. If Florida State loses, you put Texas in. But then you might have angry Buckeyes knocking on the door saying, well, wait a minute, you ranked Ohio State above Texas. Above Texas. All right? Well, did that not matter last week? Shouldn't we get in? Well, we favor conference championships. That might be where it gets to. All right, let's get to some more comments here from Kraken Hawk. You're back. Let me know what Washington podcast you were listening to, because I'm trying to formulate a network of people to kind of bring on some shows. I have a Washington guy, Roman from Locked On Huskies and Sports Illustrated. So if you know some of these 4 West Coast teams, some podcasts that are that are really good. I listened to the QB11 show for Oregon. There's the Trojan Blade on YouTube for USC and everything. So please let me know in the comments or DM me on Twitter at Big Ten Ted, by the way. Let me know some podcasts. I'm a big podcast listener now, so just drop that below or on Twitter and let me know so I can know that as well. Chris chiming in that the SEC is the best conference in college football. The SEC outside of Georgia and Bama, I think there is an argument, and we can talk about this until we might. What is it? It's 12:08 a.m. right here in Minnesota. We might be here to the wee hours of the morning if we keep on talking about Big Ten versus SEC. But I'm fine with that. But right now we gotta talk about the Washington Huskies. But Georgia and Bama very strong at the top. I think it dips a little bit right as far as the SEC. Is concerned. LSU lost a handful of games, even though they are going to have the Heisman Trophy winner. But here's the thing, right? It's Oregon, Washington, USC, teams like that come in next year to the Big Ten. Texas and Oklahoma out in the SEC. It's going to make for an even more fun argument here coming forward as well. Check it out, chiming in. I think college football is thinking TCU when it comes to FSU. College football doesn't want another blowout. This year, would they leave out an undefeated ACC champion Florida State? Wow, wouldn't that be something? That'd be crazy. A lot of interesting scenarios, but I'm going to be honest with you. I think it's pretty simple. I think it's pretty simple right now. I think it's going to end up being more simple as this thing kind of breaks down throughout all of this as well. Thanks, everybody, chiming in on the post-game show here tonight. We are going to be having a live Michigan and Iowa post-game show following that game tomorrow night as well. If it is your first time, some West Coast fans or whoever hopping by the channel, make sure you subscribe so you know when live shows like this take place, as well as uploaded content as well. It's great to have you on board here tonight. It's a great time in college football. It's time to celebrate what was the Pac-12. I appreciate, even though ESPN is a big driving force of realignment, it is good to see them paying homage a little bit to the Pac. I did not watch the complete end of the broadcast. I hope their rollout at the end of the show was paid homage to the Pac-12 as this being the final game. I did see pictures of George Kaliavkov today, and I'm like, oh, I totally forgot that guy existed. Right? I heard he'd been around, or whether he was on vacation or wherever he was, but I heard he was kind of in Montana for a little bit. You know, imagine going up for a hike in the mountains of Montana. It's like, oh, there's Big George. There's Big George. What's going on? How'd you screw this one up? Robert Maccabee. Wisconsin and Washington are both UW. You are welcome to jump on the other UW bandwagon. I love my Badgers. I will say this. I can't, man. I haven't lived in Wisconsin for a while, so I'm not around as much Badger fans as I used to be. I can't think of a scenario where anyone's come up and referred to it as UW. I've heard UW, I've heard other stuff like that, but that's a rivalry that seems to fit, right? UW versus UW in the future, Wisconsin and the Washington Huskies. Here's a comment. I saw someone else kind of bring this up before. The Big Ten will be the next best conference in college football next year with the additions of the 4 West Coast schools. Right now, it's not looking too hot for the UCLA Bruins. USC, right, they hired UCLA's defensive coordinator. I think USC is going to get it together. They got to find a quarterback. They got to find a way to improve that defense. But Washington and Oregon, you see with Ohio State. Penn State, I think, is going to be really good next year. Michigan, we'll see how they possibly bounce back over maybe losing Jim Harbaugh to the National Football League. So it's going to be fun to really find out. Like, we might come in here and have a good idea, and us Big Ten fans, we're going to be like, yeah, we're going to be the best league in America. Look at Oregon. Look at Washington. USC is going to get back. It's going to be great. It's going to be deep. It's going to be awesome, right? But I don't think we know. Next year is so different, okay? Because now you got a 12-team playoff. You've got bigger conferences and these different schedules and playing these different types of teams. For some teams, it might take a little bit. It might take a little bit to really get into the swing of things. How do these West Coast teams adapt to the Big Ten and vice versa? Texas and OU going down to the SEC. They're used to competing against the Big 12. Now they got to compete and recruit against some of the big boys in college football, like the Alabamas, like the Georgias. Wow, that was escaping my mind for a minute. So, yeah. I'm very curious to see where Oregon is going to go from here. This was a chance for the Ducks. A lot of people, and I was one of them. There was a lot of people that were saying this is an Oregon team that can win a national championship. And I will say this, in a 12-team playoff type of format, this is a team. Ohio State is another team. You put them in a 12-team format, maybe they can make a run, and maybe they get the right matchups, and other teams get upset, lose, that kind of thing. Yeah, if that happens, if we had a 12-team playoff this season, those teams like an Oregon and Ohio State would be those two teams that really stand out to me. That'd be big time. That'd be big time. But we'll see. Oregon had a shot, couldn't get it done. What's going to happen from here? That's the big question for the Oregon Ducks. What do they have to do to get over the top? Things are going to get a lot tougher for everybody. Big Ten teams, Pac-12 teams coming into the big. I can't wait for next year. Okay, I'm more, even though I'm younger, even though I'm 32 years old, I still love traditional college football. But as we look forward to next season, it's got some excitement to it, certainly, but it's also got some sadness and a certain era kind of moving on from the Pac and really other conferences as well. But I am very excited of what's to come in the Big Ten, mostly and the SEC with Texas and OU. But yeah, all right. Who's the Heisman frontrunner now? I think it's Jaden Daniels. I was a Bo Nix Heisman voter. I would say he was the guy that would get it done. But and he had a good game. I just don't think he had a fantastic game that maybe set him apart. I want to see Bo Nix be a Heisman Trophy winner. I don't know. After this performance, this was a great opportunity for Bo Nix to really make a Heisman caliber performance. And I got to go back and look at the box score. I kind of got out of the box score a little bit. Washington did a good job defensively against Bo Nix, got it done. I would say, right, if you keep this result and then maybe you put Washington in, they have a much better showing these last 6 weeks. I would say, yeah, Michael Penix is that guy, but he kind of dipped off a little bit compared to Bo Nix. So, yeah, it looks like you got Sam kind of chiming in here. Still think Jaden Daniels still wins the Heisman. Also, can we briefly talk about the confusion? We got a Jaden Daniels at LSU, and we got a Jalen Daniels over at Kansas. Both very, very good quarterbacks, great quarterbacks, and very similar names. I always thought that was always kind of interesting as well. All right, let's get to some more comments here. Yeah, I'm excited for this Oregon-Washington rivalry to be a Big Ten rivalry. I think that's going to be fun. That's going to be fun. I think that not a lot of people, and I will count myself in that, right? Coming in, I said it earlier in this stream, if you're just jumping in, I thought Washington State, Oregon State, right? But I had Doug Scott from the QB11 show on last summer, Oregon podcast, great Oregon podcast if you don't listen. And he was saying, okay, Oregon State is a lot like Michigan State. Oregon and Washington is a lot like Michigan, Ohio State. And then the light bulb kind of went on for me. It's just they're played at kind of different times of year. He's like, oh, imagine if Michigan and Michigan State were played at the end of the year and the other rivalry in the middle of the year. So, so there's that. But I'm excited to have it. I'm excited to have it at the end of the year from what I've heard from Washington writers, from Washington fans, Oregon writers, Oregon fans. They're excited to have this rivalry at the end of the year. But big congrats. I want to send a big congrats out to the University of Washington, the final Pac-12 champions. The final champions of this conference. They did a phenomenal job here tonight. They owned the trenches. They owned the line of scrimmage where Oregon was looking like maybe coming into this game like they would have an advantage in that area. It just didn't happen. Want to thank everybody for climbing aboard the live recap show here tonight. I want to take a look here at the college football playoff rankings right now and kind of take a look at some scenarios as we kind of take a look at this. So I got to find the right link. Just give me some time here to try to find this thing. But as we go on, it was a huge win for the Washington Huskies here tonight. All right, here we go. Let's take a look at them. I got them dialed up now. Here we go. Georgia, Michigan, Washington, Florida State. Boy, it's very simple if all of those teams win. You put the undefeated teams into the college football playoff. I believe Michigan gets a big-time win tomorrow. I think Michigan and Washington are in. That's where I believe right now. Unless we see a major upset, which I don't foresee happening with Iowa and Michigan in Indianapolis. I think Georgia and Alabama is going to be a fairly competitive game. If Bama's the one that wins, I think this is where things could get a little messed up because of the Alabama-Texas result. Now, if I scroll down a little bit here, okay, this is where we draw the line. You can't see my mouse, but I'm drawing the line between 8 and 9. Those are the teams that can get into the playoff. I believe 7 and 8 have a much better shot to get in than 6. But the thing is, when you look at Ohio State, 35 whatever yards away from possibly beating Michigan. But that's kind of how it goes down. You see a Michigan, like if you had no divisions, you see a Michigan-Ohio State rematch, maybe this thing goes a little bit different. Maybe this thing goes in a different direction, but that's not how it's going to take a lot. I think for Ohio State to get in, considering what we know now, you need Texas to lose, you need Florida State to lose, and you need Georgia to win. That's the route for the Buckeyes to back in at the number 4 spot into the college football playoff. I don't think it's going to happen. I think Texas wins. If you want my predictions on stuff, I think Georgia wins, I think Texas wins, and I think Louisville wins. Those are my picks for Saturday and really the remainder of this deal. Okay? So, Georgia, Michigan, Washington, Texas. I think that's a 4 that makes sense. That's a 4 that makes sense. To me. That's what I think will happen. If Florida State beats Louisville, they're in at the 4 over Texas. If Alabama wins, crumple it up, throw it out, start a new sheet. Because, what do you say? At that time, you're probably putting Michigan at 1, probably putting Washington at 2. If FSU loses, you could maybe 3 and 4 with Georgia and Bama. Something like that. If Texas wins, yeah, I don't know. If Alabama wins, this whole thing gets very confusing. The whole thing gets very confusing, and not something that I can maybe do on the fly. Here, I'm gonna be very honest with you. So, but I have thought about a lot of different scenarios as it pertains to this college football playoff. But I will say, a Georgia versus Texas in the semifinal, down there in New Orleans, I think is big, especially for ESPN, right, with Texas going to the SEC next year, and then Michigan and Washington in the Rose Bowl. I think that's for the playoff, for the networks, I think that is the cleanest, maybe best possible in terms of ratings and interest in the college football playoff. Will it go down that way tomorrow? It remains to be seen. It remains to be seen exactly how this thing is all going to go down. You know, tomorrow we're going to be having a show after the Michigan and Iowa game, so make sure you tune in for that as well. But Washington, again, another 3-point victory over the Oregon Ducks to win the Pac-12 and advance in to the college football playoff. Folks, it's getting late. It's 12:23 a.m. here in the great state of Minnesota. We're going to shut this one down here tonight. I appreciate everybody for jumping aboard the live stream. Appreciate all you future fans out there within this conference, for Oregon, for Washington. The Ducks, they're still a really good football team, folks. This is still a team that close, maybe from being undefeated. But sometimes it's that close between winning a championship and having a lot of players opt out. A lot of players opt out in a bowl game and not being at that type of level. So appreciate everybody for jumping aboard here tonight. Michigan and Iowa will take place here tomorrow night. And we'll have a reaction of that one as well when that one all goes down. So until next time, I'm Big Ten Ted. We will see you in the next one.